Well, welcome everyone. This is Margaret Smith from the Trumpeter Swan Society, and I wanted to welcome you to our webinar about the Trumpeter Swans in the South and the Arkansas Trumpeter Swan story. Right now, the webinar is being recorded. You as a participant are muted and your video is turned off, but we certainly welcome your questions. And if you have questions, you can put them in at any time in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. With us today, we have a number of people. Speaking will be Kenny Nations from Heber Springs, Dave Hoffman from the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, Karen Rowe from Arkansas Game and Fish, and Gary Ivey from the Trumpeter Swan Society. But also with us are other panelists on our board. There's Jim Hawkins from the Yukon, Whitehorse, Yukon, Mary Ann Coughlin from Massachusetts, Lori Degernes from North Carolina. And if you have any swan health questions, do submit those. Lori is retired as professor of avian medicine from North Carolina State University, and she's the person I always turn to with swan questions. So I think I got everyone. So I'm gonna get started. So if panelists could just turn off your buttons, that would be great. So our topic is Trumpeter Swans from the southern flock and the story of the Arkansas Trumpeter Swans. And what I'm going to thank you. Before we get started, I wanted to thank all the photographers who've submitted photos and videos, many of them through Trumpeter Watch. And it includes Don Angle, the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, Jim Belote, Ronald Keith Duvall, Mark Harriman, the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, Jim Kane, Jason Martin, Kenny Nations, Sharon Prislipsky, myself, and Nancy Steenburgen. You'll be seeing some wonderful photos in this presentation, and they were all taken in Arkansas. So go ahead, Kenny.
Trying to get my video up here and it's not showing me for whatever reason. But I'm Kenny Nations from Heber Springs, Arkansas. It's in Cleveland County. And the swans began showing up here in '91. And here's a map showing you where Arkansas is. Next slide. So you see the red X's over here, which shows you where these counties are listed, where the swans are most prevalent in Arkansas. It's unusual, but Arkansas has been important in the Trumpeter Swan story. First ones arrived in 1991 and have continued since. In 2008-10, there was a migration experiment between Iowa and Arkansas. And in 2021, in December, the first tracking GPS GSM collars were deployed. Heber Springs is a small town, about 6,700, and it's known for its natural resources. Little Red River and Greers Ferry Lake draw lots of tourists in. And in the fall, Magnus Lake is an important birding area year-round, and the swans up here. To the right is Mr. Terry Butler, who witnessed the first swans that came into Heber Springs or Magnus Lake in December 1990 through 91. He called some of his birding experts to verify that they were indeed trumpeter swans. 2 years after they arrived, a female Minnesota Swan 207 arrived with her mate and stayed at Magnus Lake. She came back with her family for several years before losing an orange tag. So probably was back again, just nobody recognized her without the tag. Swans come from many places, as you can see on here: Iowa, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Three Rivers Park District, Ontario, and Manitoba. Picture to the right shows you, to the left shows you one of the swans, and here's some banding information on the left. Right.
So this is from Iowa, and then this is from Wisconsin.
And that Iowa one shows up quite often. I have taken the tags numbers off of it for several years. People come from many places, as you can see here. I won't read through all of them, but the most surprising one was from Norway. He flew into Little Rock. People with the Audubon Little Rock drove him up to see the swans. He made the trip just for that. We take pride, the Heber Springs community takes pride in the swans being here. We get media attention. It draws a lot of tourism. As you can see here on the left is the KTHV Channel 11, the local CBS affiliate out of Little Rock. To the right, you see how the tourists come in. You see cameras set up, tripods, chairs. It's quite a seeing thing here. I won't read what all the visitors said, but you can go back and read this. But we have many people that come in year after year. Some spend days here, some just for a 4 or 5 hour drive come to see them. And they all are very appreciative of these beautiful birds. In our area, usually we get 250 to 300 swans, and they arrive around Thanksgiving, depart around Valentine's Day. The 3 best viewing spots in Cleveland County, all are on private properties whose owners have generously allowed the visitors access and provided parking. They are Magnus Lake, Hiram Road East Pond, Hiram Road West Pond. You may see some in fields feeding on waste grain as you're driving to these ponds. And here's your map of the locations.
This is just, Margaret, again, Magnus Lake is a oxbow lake, so you can kind of see that shape right there as well.
Mr. Verlin Abram is pretty instrumental in allowing people to view the swans. He's a long-term Trumpeter Swan Society member and passed away in September of 2023. He has 2 private large ponds, and he attracts the swans since 2010. He graciously gave permission for the public to view these swans and gave permission to use his property to capture and put GPS collars on the swans for the Midwest Swan Tracking Project. Magnus Lake, here we go, 25-acre oxbow off the Little Red River, and it's 6 miles east of Heber Springs. Easy access once you reach Heber Springs. 2 photos of Magnus Lake. You can see the swans in both. It's a beautiful setting.
Right, and here, just so you know, there's a fence right there, so the swans and the birds are right below you, which is a different experience than at the Hiram Road ponds. You can actually, walk up by them. So this is a video, y'all, and Kenny's going to explain what the birds are, but this is at Magnus Lake. So here's a trumpeter swan. You can see how close they get to you, and it's really quiet at the beginning, but Kenny will explain the birds that you see here.
This first bird you see are the ringneck ducks. I won't go into more detail to that till later, but these swans on the water, you see ring-billed gulls flying overhead. Hiram Road East Pond.
Well, these are Verlin's properties.
Yes, those are Verlin's property, yes.
Yeah.
That too is from the East Pond. East Pond taking
right,
off and landing.
Yeah, these are showing you some of the beautiful birds and, photo opportunities that you'll have when you go to Heber Springs as well. So again, they're up close, they're beautiful, they're big, and you can really capture some wonderful moments.
Photo opportunities are outstanding.
Yeah.
Now, if one wants to get up early in the morning, this is sunrise on the East Pond on Hiram Road. And this picture was stuck in here because I wanted people to realize you don't have to have expensive gear. This is a cell phone photo.
Okay, I'm gonna play a couple videos. This one, you'll be able to see the trumpeter swans flying in. This is at the East Pond, and you'll be able to kind of see the scope of that. And then here's another video by Nancy Steenburgen taken there at East Pond. And a couple things I want you to know about this is there's a QR code up here that if you scan it with your phone, it'll take you to a PDF of trumpeter swan behavior that was written by Harry Lumsden in Ontario. And it's on our website, but you can actually get it here. And I actually use this PDF when I'm trying to understand swan behavior. And in this video by Nancy, you'll see some interesting behavior. You'll see the swans taking off. You'll see a typical S shape when they take off. You'll see them flying low, but then when they land, you'll see a little skirmish, and you'll see what's called raised wing display. And then you'll also see when the pair are separated, they come back together after a little fight with another swan, and they engage in what's called quivering wing display as well as a triumphant display. So we'll play this. And this is great for photo opportunities as well. You can see how those wings are reflected in that clear water. So from a photography standpoint, you can get some beautiful shots. And Nancy did a great job of keeping the swans tracking in her camera or phone, whatever it was that she used to take this video. So the swans are coming around the pond, so you can sort of see the expanse of that east pond there. Well, they don't know there's a little unexpected happening. It's going to take place. So they're coming in, they're going to go to a different spot there, kind of close to where they were before. Oops, somebody didn't like that. So there's the chase and the nipping. There's the raised wing display there. Now here comes the mate. And there's the quivering wing display and triumphant display. That's there too from the pair. So they're reaffirming their pair bond. Did any of the other biologists want to say anything about this before I go on? Or was that okay? Okay, go ahead, Kenny.
Okay, the Hiram Road Ponds, as you can see in the summer, there's no music of the swans. We look very forward to the swans returning each year. I could sit and listen to them, watch them all day long. And obviously many other people can too.
So this is a video taken on the West Pond, and it was early February. But a couple things that first I want you to see how big it is. But over here there'll be a swan doing some somersaults. But this swan is a cygnet that had hatched the summer before, and it's going to be taking a quick bath. It'll dip and dip, and it'll strike its wings against the water, and that helps to dislodge some of the dirt and things that are on the wings. And then it goes into display. So if you're looking for photo opportunities, that's where you would actually see that. And then you could see it was a cygnet because of the gray mottled wings. And now it's going into preening behavior. Okay, so Dave and Karen, you're up.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Iowa-Arkansas connection and some about migration experiment and kind of a little bit updates and what we kind of learned. First, I'd like to recognize Ron Andrews here on the left from Iowa DNR. Ron is one of the main coordinators for the Iowa program and is really mainly person responsible for getting this really started in Iowa. And really like to recognize Ron and all he's contributed to the Iowa Swan program as well. And maybe Karen can introduce herself here as well, here for the Arkansas connection.
I'm Karen Rowe. I'm the non-game bird program coordinator, so I work across the whole state. Believe it or not, I've been the non-game bird biologist for the agency for 40 years. This is my 40th anniversary. And I have to say, this has been one of the most exciting and most successful projects that we've been involved in here in Arkansas. I am a member of the Mississippi Flyway, the Arkansas representative to the non-game bird technical committee. And when we were approached by Iowa representatives who have been asking other states to participate in a wintering program for immature or juvenile trumpeter swans, there weren't a lot of other states that were terribly interested, but I was aware of what was going on at Magnus Lake with the swans colonizing wintering sites there. So after talking to my husband, who always has a famous saying to accompany his wise wisdom, he told me, what the heck, Columbus took a chance. So we in Arkansas took a chance, and we got involved with the Iowa DNR in this reverse migration trumpeter swan experiment.
Yep. And part of the goal was to get swans migrating further south. It seemed like mainly in Iowa, especially with mild temperatures, the trumpeters are actually some of the last birds to leave. And if they don't have to, if they're not forced out by the ice freezing up and by the lack of food or by the thick snow, they'll typically stay in Iowa. But so we actually wanted to encourage some of that natural migration to southern states. And so a plan was developed, and we had to proposed as many as relocating as close to 120 young free-flying swans, sites from Iowa where they were hatched and raised or their natal areas. And actually we had 2 areas identified down in Arkansas at the Buffalo River National Park and at Hollow Bend. And we worked to obtain green collars for these swans to mark those, and with the goal that they'd be able to read those collars and be tracked as well. So this was seen as a reverse migration imprinting study. It's really what swans had never really been tried before, but the idea was for those young swans raised in Iowa on their, we call the natal areas, allow those young cygnets to fly in Iowa, imprint, get their bearings, and then actually be located to Arkansas. So a little more about the imprinting. What we see is the swans typically imprint on the areas where they learn to fly and then return to those areas. And for example, we've had swans from Washington State. Young cygnets then received Iowa. We've also had swans as far from the East Coast, but those swans, before we received them, they had never flown. But once they came to Iowa, they were released. They learned to fly, and they would imprint on Iowa. For example, we had swans in northern Iowa. They were raised on the West Coast, but released in Iowa, learned to fly, imprinted, and they would fly to Oklahoma, for example, Arkansas. And they would actually, some of those return within 50 to 100 yards from where they were released. So we can go to the next slide there. So yeah, the first year there was 18 trumpeters released in Arkansas. 2009 there was an additional 15, and then in 2010 16 swans. So a total of 49 swans released in Arkansas. And just a little more too is again the importance of some of those swans. They were fledged in Iowa, and what we hoped is they would actually imprint on Iowa. We did have some challenges there. Some of those swans, once they fledged or flew in Iowa, we had difficulty catching those swans. And so that was part of our goal, is they imprint on Iowa. So some of those swans actually released in Iowa, or swans released in Arkansas, actually never flew or fledged in Iowa, but they fledged or imprinted on Arkansas instead. So I'll talk a little more about successes and such later in the slides, but that maybe plays into some of the reasons why swans returned to Iowa or didn't return to them as well. So we can go on to the next slide there. So maybe Karen can chat a little more about with some of the Arkansas connection there.
Yeah, one of our biggest supporters of the reverse migration experiment in Arkansas was a gentleman by the name of George Dunklin Jr. He was a game and fish commissioner at the time of our project. And he's also been president of DU, and he's a wetland person all around, and he started some schools for graduate students in wetlands and waterfowl. The interesting thing about the two sites in Arkansas is the Buffalo River site, Buffalo National River site, was chosen at the request of Buffalo National River because they had a few trumpeters that had stopped on migration a year or two earlier and just remained on the pond there. And so they thought that perhaps that indicated that that might be an ideal place for the experiment. And then the Hollow Bend National Wildlife Refuge is a beautiful wetland refuge along the Arkansas River. And of course, the Arkansas River serves as a pathway for migration for a variety of birds, everything from golden eagles and bald eagles to waterfowl and to swans. And I think that's been the ideal spot for these birds. Okay, next slide.
Okay. Dave, this is to kind of talk about the process, or Karen?
Yeah.
It's not just the state deciding they want to do it.
So there's really quite the process and the approval required from this, going through the Mississippi Flyway Council that involves 18 states and part of the Mississippi Flyway. So also cooperation with the National Park Service, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the state agencies. And so it's really quite a process to get this experiment approved and get it rolling as well. And again, Ron Andrews is the part of the program coordinator. We have a picture of their swans on the left, and that's actually a kind of a holding pen where the swans were gathered, held in that pen temporarily as things were being coordinated. They were held there temporarily waiting for their trip down to Arkansas. So here's a picture with the press and the public being involved. 16 swans here in 2010. This just shows kind of more of the details of location, releases in Arkansas, Buffalo River to the north, Hollow Bend is a refuge to the south. And so for more information, you can kind of go to one of the websites here too on the Buffalo National River. It tells a little more about the river, and it's just really quite a scenic area and really beautiful spot there for the swans. We can go on to the next slide with the importance of the wildlife refuge there at Hollow Bend. Really quite important area for wintering waterfowl. And just over 7,000 acres, I believe, there, but really quite a neat area. And just, again, right to explain the importance of habitat and wildlife refuges and importance really of habitat for these trumpeter swans as they migrate from northern states to southern. And that's been kind of one of our concerns as swans migrate too. Do they have adequate habitat, adequate food, adequate protection as they travel and winter and migrate from northern states to southern as well?
One point to make, Dave, if people are interested in seeing swans, Hollow Bend has an observation area and they still can be seen from Hollow Bend and an area called the Atkins Bottoms. However, there are no longer any swans that have been seen at the Buffalo National River pond site. So as beautiful as the Buffalo National River area is, especially with their elk population, it's not a place to go see trumpeter swans.
Good. Here's a picture of a bait trap used in Iowa. This is down at Blaine Bacon's down in Cass County. but what we do is set up a trap. These are young cygnets who were actually hatched at this pond in Iowa. They actually fledged and learned to fly. And with this bait trap, they were baited in with food, corn, and then there's a plastic gate there to the right as the swans come into the trap. Then the trap door is kind of sprung. And so just a picture of the swans being captured and just being held before their relocation down to Arkansas. Here we have a release actually down in Arkansas. We have a picture of a young gal, and it was really neat to have the public and people engaged with part of this release, to see their support, and just really quite amazing how docile the swans are as well, with kids and adults, and yeah, just again how docile they are before release, and this picture right before the swans are released.
Many people in Arkansas are familiar with Canada geese, which can be a bit aggressive. And in a position like this, a Canada goose might try to take a little bit of a nip out of you. So it was always exciting to work and to see the public's reaction to such friendly, docile birds.
Picture with some additional public helping with the release here, 2008 release.
And Karen, this is you, correct?
Yes, that's me. And I have to say that when you hold a swan like that, after you've held it for a number of minutes, if not longer, you kind of get sore when you're done. You realize you've used muscles that you don't usually use because of the way you have to really grasp and really hold on to and grip that swan. They are extremely strong birds.
So some of these can weigh up to even 28 pounds in size. So many of these were actually 1 and 2 year olds. The other part I was going to talk about, I don't know if we have a picture of the close-up of the collar, but we can see some of the collars on some of these birds. They do appear like those collars are tight, and that's really quite a common question and quite a common concern. But it is kind of misconceiving to tell the collars look tight, but with all the feathers around the neck there, the collars are actually aren't really that tight in how they slide up and down, but just the thick feathers makes it appear that the collars are quite tight there. But they typically, there hasn't been any problems with the collars being tight, and the other part is the longevity of the collars. The collars are plastic. It seems like they do get brittle and break over time. We've had collars that are lost within a year to 2 years, but it seems like typically 3 to 4 years for the average lifespan. We've had some on swans close to 18 years. And 2 of the swans that are still present, that 4P2, 4P4, they were actually hatched in 2009 in Iowa, and it sounds like those 2 still have their collars on, 2009. So that's really quite the lifespan on those collars. And here's a release after the swans, the public releasing the swans there. And again, I was going to just chat about the partnerships too, with from the state agencies, Iowa, Arkansas, cooperation with the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Park Service, the Mississippi Flyway Council, and just really all the partnerships. It's really quite amazing, all the people that come together to make this successful program here.
What you're viewing here is a small oxbow lake, and on the other side, before you get to the mountains, is the Arkansas River. So it's a great mix of habitat and migration pathways, and all the wetlands along the Arkansas River just provide a wealth of native vegetation, as well as the agricultural fields have waste grain. Okay, next.
Here's Ron and I took a side trip to Magnus Lake to check out the swans that were migrating to Arkansas. Also looking at what are the swans feeding on? That's one of the questions in the comments. The aquatic vegetation is, especially there at Hollow Bend. Notice the aquatic plants there at Buffalo River. One of the things I noticed was really the duckweed there, and it's one of the swans' favorite food is the duckweed, but also the aquatic plants. But also we noticed they were feeding on the waste grain in the fields. There's other parts in south where they're feeding in the rice fields and some of the the wheat and barley harvested, but typically the waste grain is another one of their favorites as well. So we're actually down in the area. We did notice a swan that was marked. Here's a Wisconsin collar, but it was really quite the note of several states collars and marked swans from as far as Ontario, Manitoba, Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin. I've named quite a few, but it's really quite amazing the number of swans that do migrate to south there, and number to Arkansas too.
Hey, Dave, can I intervene here for just a second?
You bet.
Margaret, can you go back one slide? Even though that's the same thing. This is the Magnus Lake where you were at. And I just want to say on here, because people may say, I want to go over there. That is on the private side that the public is not allowed in. Across the lake is the fence that showed earlier, and that's where you'd be looking from.
Okay.
So here's some of the results. Some of the swan movements. We had a swan here from Lake Wapello State Park 1P1, traveled up into Illinois, up into north central Iowa, Beamer's Pond, it's major wintering area in Iowa, and then back down to Heber Springs. So, and it did have a mate as well. So we did see some birds that were moving as well. Next slide. We had some reports even clear up into central Minnesota. And just the number of red stars there is reports of some of these Arkansas swans further north. And some of these swans then returning to Arkansas. Some of the little disappointing is there was really not a whole lot of reports of swans. Mainly, we've heard some people think, well, somebody else turned that sighting in, reported it. But otherwise, it just seems like, especially during the summer, the swans really aren't moving much. And there's really just not a whole lot of reports during the summer months. And we do get more reports in the fall as they're migrating. But so the other thing it's like to emphasize is the importance of reporting these swans. One is through the Trumpeter Swan Watch. You can also report through the bird banding lab, report these. And it's really important to get these sightings, and then it really helps us to monitor these trumpeters as well. So let's go on to the next slide. Here's again, here's some of the movements and kind of the success I thought was kind of interesting. Neat is one of these marked swans finding a mate in Iowa, and also with a youngster, and then that marked swan with a mate returning to Arkansas. So taking some friends with him. So again, it was not a whole lot of reports during the summer, more in the winter. And so that's been kind of some of the importance or some of the advantages using some of these GSM collars, is able to track these swans without having the public, without having a visual report or visual sighting on those, is how those come from the cell phone towers, and how we can get to multiple locations even daily with some of these GSM collars. So let's go to the next slide. So here's a map of Iowa reported swans, ones we released here in Iowa. Over 4,400 reports, 800 swans collared, but it's really quite remarkable to see sightings in 17 states, 3 provinces of Canada. We've had Iowa swans migrate north over 1,200 miles, round trip of over 1,800 miles when they migrate into southern states. And so as far as successes, so it'd been nice to have more reports and more sightings of these swans to kind of learn about them, but it did sound like a number of these swans did leave Arkansas, migrated north, and returned further south. There was a little question, is some of these swans, they didn't fledge in Iowa and didn't imprint in Iowa. So some of these swans were moved to Arkansas first. They imprinted it in Arkansas and then flew, or actually then pioneered north into the northern states. So there's kind of some little details we're kind of looking at there yet too. But in short, it seemed like their swans released in Arkansas did move north and into migrate north, so to speak, in a reverse migration north and then return to Arkansas. And so I believe there's some successes there, and the other part is we were able to learn from this as well. The other part is just some of the outreach, awareness, and just some of the public support that gathered for Trumpeter Swans as well was really, I see, as part of success as well. And then also promoting the habitat and the importance of Trumpeter Swan, especially wintering areas down south. The next slide. So back to, I think, Karen or Kenny here on this slide.
Okay,
So
Karen.
this is a pair of swans that have been observed in what we call Atkins Bottoms. Atkins is a lake just off the Arkansas River, and it's just a little east of the Hollow Bend National Wildlife Refuge. And this pair, which I believe, Dave, you corrected us and said they were released in 2009, have repeatedly come to Arkansas every winter since their release. And one of our very active birders, Ron Duvall, has been photographing birds in the Atkins Bottoms area and has been seeing this pair of trumpeter swans during the summer. This was 2 years ago. He saw the pair. And so far, we have not been able to document that they have nested and successfully raised young, but the area that they are in during the summer is private land. There's a lot of different types of wetland vegetation that can be fairly dense. So this is a special pair we're keeping our eyes on, and maybe they will nest, although I will have to add to that there are no documented nesting historically of trumpeter swans in Arkansas. So this would be the first nest if they made it, but they may just have decided that it's kind of silly to keep going back and forth when they have so much food and so much wonderful habitat here in Arkansas. But this is a unique pair, and the only pair we know of that stays in the state close to year round.
And this is the same pair. Again, this was this year, so just a few weeks ago, that Round the Ball had taken. And then we have a Trumpeter Watch Report. Trumpeter Swan Society has a Trumpeter Watch Report. And I get reports of these Iowa marked birds as well in Arkansas. And so last year, this was one that was sent in at the end of November at Atkins Bottom. So these birds are still here in Arkansas, and they, some of them still have their collars.
And I recommend to Dave to go back and look in 2009 and see what kind of collar glue you used, because obviously I need to use that same kind of glue on my boots that keep falling apart, because it's done a wonderful job of keeping these collars on these birds safely and securely all these years.
One little trick of that is that the glue actually allows the flexibility of the collar when the plastic is warm or cold. It allows the collar to flex a little more. So it was really quite interesting, just the little research to go behind to get the special glue. If you get a glue like a super glue, it actually holds the collar too tight, and it makes it actually less life on the collars. Without the flex, it causes the collar to crack and fall off.
Neat.
So, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna talk about the GPS collaring now, but we'll have other people come in. But the Midwest started a Midwest tracking project with GPS, GSM collars, tracking collars, and Michigan and Minnesota began sort of in 2019, but in 2020, in the summer of 2020, quite a few collars were put on, and the states and provinces participating were Iowa, Manitoba, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio, and Wisconsin. And at that time, Trumpeter Swan Society wanted to also see if we could get collars on Arkansas swans to track where those Arkansas swans are going. And that was put off until 2021 because of COVID. But one of the really interesting, it's really cool story is in November of 2020, so the summer after this collar was put on. This is a Minnesota bird, 8E. It had a remarkable journey down to Arkansas. And we reported this in our donor newsletter, Trumpetings. And 8E, this is from David Wolfson, who is the Minnesota researcher who's getting his PhD with this tracking study and wrote for us. And so 8E was collared on July 2020, and he was one of the biggest swans that was caught. And all of a sudden he showed up in Heber Springs, and I asked David to find out more about this. And so what he said is, this is on November 29th, so pretty much right after Thanksgiving. He said it was in Monticello, Minnesota, which is near the Twin Cities. He says around 7 p.m. it took off from Monticello and made almost a direct path down to Arkansas, covering about 700 miles in 12 hours. The flight averaged 55 miles per hour over the entire time, didn't appear to dip below 45 miles per hour at any point, and if the sensor data is accurate, hit a maximum speed of 75 miles per hour. There was a strong tailwind from the northwest, which helped a lot, and the swan arrived in Heber Springs area the next morning, November 30, around 7:30 a.m. So here it is at the feeder, probably at the East Pond, and it was just a remarkable story. We would never have known this if there weren't the GPS collars on these birds. So corn is fed to the swans at 3 locations, and then we wanted to get the collars put on the Arkansas swan. So Gary, are you there? Gary? Well, Gary,
He's there, and it looks like he's trying to get his
microphone working?
yeah.
Okay. Well, Gary, just pop in whenever you can, but this is actually the photo story, and Jim Kane sent these pictures, which was great, of what it took to actually capture those swans. So here, the corn was being put into the feeders, and Gary is putting in the traps and, pegs and wires and things like that to be able to capture.
Can you hear me?
Yep, now we can. So you go ahead, Dave, Gary.
Okay, I think it was December 21st, 2022. I drove 2.5 days to Arkansas and spent the night with one of our society members. And early the next morning, we got up and met with the Arkansas crew and went to these 2 pond sites where we're pretty much pre-baited with this corn. They're feeding the swans, and whole corn's like candy. And those birds are so used to people taking photos and being close that they're pretty tame. And I set up my snares, which are a series of basically snares that are on these fiberglass pegs. They're made from a 100-pound test monofilament fishing line. You probably can't see them in these photos, but they're a little circle snare that they walk into with their feet. And as they catch the swans, the pegs pop out of the ground, which relieves stress on the birds. There's about 30 or so snares on each line, and they're anchored in at the end. And anyway, we caught the 3 swans for collaring, plus another 7 that we let go that we thought might be related to the ones that we already caught. And right off the bat, we caught 2 domestic mallards just as soon as I got the snare set up. So 10 swans and 3 ducks in 2 hours.
And then it went for the Arkansas group. Go ahead, Karen.
Well, we took the birds and placed them in secure horse feed sacks so that we could not let them damage themselves or damage their wings, and held them. And then we did what biologists refer to as processing. That is, we took measurements of the birds, we weighed them. We take measurements of the colon, which is a significant portion of the beak. We took blood so that the birds could be analyzed for their relative health, if they were carrying any chronic lead poisoning amounts, and then submitted this data. As well as, I have to point out that our waterfowl biologist, myself, and 2 other biologists who we all enjoy being in the outdoors, and this was literally the coldest day that year. We still talk about how terribly cold it was, and yet there was Kenny Nations and Gary and everyone else seemed to be doing just fine. But I think the reason we caught those birds so fast is because we were moving as fast as we could to stay warm. And then the nice thing about using these force feed sacks is you could then set the bird on the ground, cut a little slit, and then just simply peel the bag back. And the swan was able to then stand up, excuse me, and walk into the water instead of being stressed by a hand release where it takes off. Next slide.
And this is one of the swans was 7L. So you can see the collar, the GPS collar, and the black are solar panels to for the battery in there. And 7L is a male, but here's 7L back on the pond. So there were 4 swans that were collared. 7L is the male right here. 8L and 9L were females. And then there was a cygnet that was captured, OH. And it was, I think actually OH was one of the youngsters of 7L.
Also, to make the transmitters or the transmitters work, or the collars, they have to be, and we went ahead and hung them out of doors, and then worked with the Trumpeter Swan Society and Minnesota researchers to make sure that the collars were in fact charged and transmitting, so that we knew that they were working when they placed them on the swans.
Here's some more collars right in there. Yeah. Okay, so here are the swans that received the collars back on the pond, probably at the end of December 2021. And just so you know, OH did die by a predator a few weeks later. So the cygnet did die, and that collar had actually come from a Manitoba swan. But I want to say thank you to the donors to the Trumpeter Swan Society for purchasing, 3 of these GPS collars. Without people donating, we wouldn't have been able to do that. Arkansas Game and Fish Commission and Gary Ivey for the capture and collaring and testing of the swans, and to Verlin, for his permission to use his property to, capture and collar the swans. And then of course, all the members and people there who were very hospitable and helped put us up. So that was great.
As for OH, the man who is the caretaker of the Magnus Lake Farms had an animal killed by a feral or loose dog the previous week, and he believed, given what the bird looked like and the likelihood of the fact that it was probably not a wild predator, but a feral or loose dog that did that swan in. So it's so important to make sure that we keep our animals restrained.
Right. So just right before Thanksgiving, 9L came back and arrived in Heber Springs for her 3rd winter. So it's really great, that she's back on the pond. And with this tracking, there were some surprises, and this is all on a public website. So I just kind of want to show you quickly where these 3 swans were. So the mapping is through the University of Minnesota. So here's Heber Springs, and here's where these 3 swans went for the summer. And so they went back up here, and I'm going to have a close-up now. So here are the summer locations. So 7L went over to Manitoba, and 9L and 8L are up here in Western Ontario. So that's where they spend the summer. Obviously, you can see this is a remote area. So that's how far swans come, to Arkansas. And then closer to where you are now in Arkansas, these are the movements of the swans there, so here's Heber Springs, so here are the ponds. And so all of these lines are movements where those swans have been. So this is really showing how the landscape and farm fields and satellite ponds or whatever are visited by the swans over time. So this is from December of 2021 through November of 2023. So now we're back to Kenny. So Kenny,
Okay.
you want to take it away?
I am here, and let me go back to OH for a second, that the dog or whatever got. To me, one of the important things about those collars is we never would have missed that swan had it not been collared. So we know there's predators out there, but that allowed me to know one was missing. And it also gives me information to tell people, please keep your dogs in the truck. We don't want people to get, swans to get used to dogs the way they do people, or we're setting them up for bad experiences. So here are a few things that I've kind of learned watching the swans. You see Terry Butler and I, this great picture of Verlin who I'm using my cursor, that's not good. Lower right, Verlin Abram with a couple of swans. Verlin loved these swans dearly and did everything in his power to take care of them while they were here. The upper picture is just the swans gathering around me. Many people around here, they will not recognize the tundra swan, so I put this picture together and posted it to kind of show a comparison when they're looking straight on. And you can see the trumpeter swan on the left has kind of the V in the face of the bill, the beak there. And the tundra swan on the right, it's more of a horizontal line across there. And you can see the yellow dots on the bill there. A little better picture side view so people can see it, because they won't realize they're about a quarter the size smaller than the trumpeter, but when they're all out there together, they don't see it. Mute swans, we don't have many. I've seen 3 in the 17 years I've been watching them. For my money, I don't want them in there, period, with the trumpeters, but they are a beautiful bird. And here's one we refer to as Old Crooked Neck. It flew in last January. I monitored it for about 3 weeks before it migrated to make sure it was feeding good, flying good, swimming good. It has a mate with it, and it appeared to have no difficulties. But Lori, would you like to say something about this one?
Yeah, it's this is Lori Deggerness, a bird vet. We can only speculate what happened here. It looks like a traumatic injury, and our best guess is that there was some kind of a power line collision that this bird happened to survive. Most of the time they don't survive, but it's most likely not something that was a congenital deformity. So something that happened traumatically as a post-fledgling bird.
Unusual things I've seen here. This is about 15 years ago. I heard a commotion, looked out, and a mink was attacking a swan. And to be completely honest with you, watching this fight, I couldn't determine, was the mink trying to drown the swan or was the swan trying to drown the mink? But it seemed like it lasted a long time. And in reality, it was probably 20 or 30 seconds, but it very unusual sight to see a mink attack a swan. And fishing times, how I labeled this photo. I've seen this twice where a swan had a fish in his mouth, but it's very unusual behavior. It's just 2 swans pair bonding after they flew into the pond. And here we're just seeing a swan flying in.
And you can also see the feet come down
Yes.
for the landing, yep.
And again, coming in, this was at Magnus Lake, and it's up there to show you the beauty. You have the golden hour there where the lights makes the water look like a gold color, and you see the wings in different positions, how they can fly together and not hit each other. Here's a family just acknowledge me, I'm here. And you see the signet behind it, and I'm gonna tell you, for my money, most of the skirmishes I see, them little signets, they're just kind of mean and get stuff started. See a little skirmish here, but if you look, you see they're just nipping at the feathers. There's nothing there that shows that they're trying to hurt one another. It's just determining your pecking order. Follow up on that and see the heads wrapped around. They're not attacking each other's heads, just snipping at the wings a little bit. Another fight, they're coming in, they got their territory, let's establish the pecking order. This is my place, and that over there is yours. A little follow up of it there, chasing it, picking at the wings, snipping at it a little bit. This one, you see the two that to me is a defense mechanism. It's showing the wings really spread out to make themselves look better. And they have one cygnet there. And you have another family swimming up with two cygnets. So just a dispute over the territory. This one, that one in the back was flying in. If you look close on the swan on the left, you'll see another swan under it. Obviously, air traffic controller wasn't working good given the landing pattern. This was just took because of the sheer beauty of it. The one stretching out, I assume straightening their wings, and you have the pair behind it. We don't have a lot of snow and ice here in Arkansas, but it's exciting to see them because we always see them take off running on water. So seeing them on ice is something special. Now the little squabble bunch just came in. They got to fuss a little bit, and then they'll find their mates and everything will calm down. Magnus Lake, you see the frost on the trees back there. It was just a beautiful picture. I had to take it. This is on the East Pond, and for whatever reason, diesel vehicles seem to affect the swans and ducks more than a normal gasoline vehicle, the sound of it. So when the truck pulled in the parking lot, the birds took off. It's another one just announcing his arrival, his or her. Little chase scene, excellent photo opportunities, the water splashing, it's just beautiful. Another one announcing I'm here. Little parabonding going on here after they landed, and I know parabonding is the correct thing, but if you were talking to me there, I'd probably look at you, so they're just rebonding. And here's the picture that probably 99% of the people want to get, the parabonding with the heart, and it does a beautiful photo. And there's many other birdings here to see. The ringneck duck, next slide. Buffleheads, those are in there because that is my cue here when I'm watching for the swans to come in. Those ducks usually come in about 2 weeks before the swans arrive. And these others, Margaret, you can just go through them. It's just to show them some pictures of what they might see while they're here. And I know we're short of time. So the canvasback duck there, Verlin, as a young man, duck hunted when he was in college, and he informed me he had never seen a canvasback. That one landed. I had to get that picture, and it hangs in his house to this day. You see there's lots of different kind of waterfowl there. The bald eagle is there because across from Magnus Lake, about 800 yards, there's a nest on the edge of the river, and they've raised there the last 3 years, and this is taken from the parking lot at Magnus Lake.
Great. Well, thank you, Kenny, and, thank you, Dave and Karen and Gary and Lori and everybody, who's helped with that. So we're going to have some time for questions, if you have any, to, submit them in the Q&A button at the bottom, and Marianne will read those to us. But also, after the end of this webinar, there will be a very brief survey that'll pop up in your browser that we hope you'll fill out. It's very brief. And if you want to learn more about Arkansas swans or anything about swans, you can visit our Trumpeter Swan Society.org website. And of course, if you want to help and be part of some of this wonderful work that we do, you can scan the QR code. So Marianne, are there any questions?
Yes, we do have some questions, and please feel free to enter more. The first question is from Jim, and this is on swan behavior. Do these swans get anything to eat in the ponds, or are they dependent on feeding in the agricultural areas nearby, and what crops do they feed on?
Well, for my part here in Heber Springs, we provide corn, but they go out and feed in the fields, and there's a lot of plants in the water that they feed on naturally.
We also have a question from Jerry. When do we stop when do you stop calling the young cygnets and start calling them immature swans or young swans?
It depends on the person. So sometimes the biologists refer to the swans that are almost a year old. They're still gray, but they call them yearlings. Once they turn white, their second summer, you can't really tell the age. Now, I personally will call them cygnets until their second summer, but other people will call them immature swans or whatever. So I don't know, Dave or Gary, you want to weigh in on this? I think it's probably a matter of, who's saying it, but that's just me.
I
Dave?
call them cygnets until they're like 1 year of age, or the other part is just by visual. When they turn gray to white, is then I refer them as a subadult or a juvenile. But when they're still gray, I still call them a cygnet.
Okay. I do too.
So John is wondering what we've learned from the DNA studies of the trumpeter swans.
I'm not sure about the DNA studies. There's been some genetic testing, but that's a whole different.
For that, if you can hear me.
Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, Sarah Euler McCanson, our co-author, she works for USGS as a DNA scientist and studied trumpeter swans. And she found that there are two basic forms of trumpeter swans. The Pacific Coast population and the Rocky Mountain population are two different genetic groups. And she also found that the trumpeter swans had the least genetic diversity of any waterfowl species ever studied. And there was some historic bottleneck that narrowed their genetics probably 10,000 years ago. But that's about all I can say about that. We are trying to sort out the genetics of swans for releases because the Rocky Mountain population swans are required for the Greater Yellowstone releases. And we've got several partners that we're working with for release projects in that area in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming.
Do we track? Oh, go ahead, Gary.
I think he was done.
Do you track trumpeter swans with MODIS?
No.
Lee asks, can you determine the gender by sight?
No.
And John asks, would the two trumpeter swan groups be subspecies? Back to that question about DNA.
They're not considered subspecies.
And those are the questions that we have. Let's wait a moment and see if there are any others.
Well, while you're waiting on questions, I would like to thank all y'all for being panelists on here and allowing me the opportunity to be a part of it.
Well, and we're just really grateful, Kenny, and Karen and Dave and Gary, for everybody to, be part of this, because I think this has been really substantive. And I know that I certainly, have learned a lot more about the Arkansas swan story. And I think it's something to celebrate and something, that we're going to share certainly on YouTube as well as on our website. So it's been great to have all this. So
We have had a few more questions come in, Margaret.
okay.
So Dave asks, is there a way to see online the status of a banded swan? This is someone who's been following 4C for a couple years.
Well, so 4C must be one of the GPS swans. So this is a 3-year study, Midwest study, and David Wolfson is the researcher. And so he's the one who's been publishing and uploading data sites to the tracking website. But now there hasn't been a lot of movement, of those swans, and some of the collars are no longer working. And then my understanding is also some cell phone towers have gone from 3G to 5G. And I think these GPS collars were designed that, for this study for the 3G network. And so if they encounter a 5G cell phone tower, they're not going to download the data. So he is occasionally uploading the data, but now he's going to be getting into the analysis as well. So tracking it, continuing to track it ad infinitum is not going to happen just because it's a 3-year study and it's going to be wrapping up soon. Hope that answers the question.
There is some of that information like on 4C and those other swans still available online on that Minnesota website that explains about the GMS collars. So some of those can still be,
Yeah.
some of the past info still is present on that website.
Thank you. Anna asks, do mute swans cause any issues for the trumpeter swans?
The mute swans are very aggressive. And if you just have one in there, you don't see any problem. When we had two, they would tend to get together and chase off the trumpeters a little bit. But that's my only concern, is they're very aggressive, not only to the other swans, but to people that are there.
We've seen where they compete in Iowa with the native trumpeters for nesting areas, but also how they can be destructive to the natural aquatic vegetation, where they'll kind of actually root up and tear out some of the aquatic plants. So they not only compete, but it's destructive to some of the aquatic plants.
And then our final question is, why do the feathers turn gray after feeding underwater?
They don't. Young birds, young swans hatch out and they have gray feathers for their first year. So that doesn't change. Those gray feathers will change to white. My guess is what might be happening is people are seeing the brownish or tannish staining that happens on the head and the neck. And that will happen with the white swans as well. What happens is the feathers pick up staining from the tannins and other minerals in the water. And so that affects the coloring. So, you know, you might go, gee, what's that dirt or whatever on the top of that swan's head? It's not, it's the staining from whatever waters that swan fed in. And so swans feed upside down. They do have their heads, you know, submerged in the water for quite a bit of time. And those white feathers just absorb the staining that's in there. So Dave or Gary, you want to add anything to that?
I think that's accurate. It's mostly rust stains they get on their forehead because they dig down in the mud.
Okay.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's what I tell people, maybe a high iron in that body of water.
Yeah, so it seems like it does vary too on what areas or what type of wetland they're feeding. Some of them get more of the tannins and the rust staining, and then there's other wetlands with less, and the swans don't have the staining or discoloring or brownish on those feathers.
We did have another question come in back to the mute swans, asking if we're doing anything to cull the mute swans.
Mute swans are so slim here. The only time you usually see mute swans in Arkansas would be on somebody's ponds, where they clip the wing and keep them on those ponds.
And the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission is in the process of developing a project to require registration of mute swans and to prohibit the reproduction of those swans unless the birds are clipped and unable to fly.
Yeah, this is Margaret. Just a couple things in case people don't know. So mute swans are not native to North America. So the two North American swan species, native swan species, are the tundra swan and the trumpeter swan. And the mute swans actually are from Europe. You know, in England, they're called the queen swans. And so people at the turn of the last century, you know, brought them over to the mute swans over to their estate. And, you know, people wanted them on their properties or at cemeteries or parks or whatever. And those were the swans that were available. So in the United States, mute swans are not a protected species under the Endangered Species Act, but they are protected. My understanding is they are still protected in Canada. So in North America, in the Midwest, when Michigan and Ohio wanted to start their restoration program, there was already a fairly significant number of mute swans in those states. And so the states were concerned that the mute swans would be competing with prime habitat that they really wanted the trumpeter swans that they wanted to restore back to the state have access to. And so those states have mute swan removal programs. Doesn't affect private properties, but I think they remove the mute swans from public lands and that kind of thing. So it's more that they're not protected in the United States, and they are protected. My understanding is they are protected in and Canada. And the issue was for the states is, are they going to be competing for habitat for the species that the native species that the states actually want to restore back to, you know, their states.
And those are all the questions, Margaret.
Okay. Well, great, everyone. Thanks so much for coming, and it'll take me about 3 days to get the recording up on YouTube, and you will get an email from Zoom with a link to the recording. And we really appreciate you coming and being a part of this, and for everyone sharing their information, and for you learning more about it. And hopefully we'll see you at our next webinar. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right.